Hello and welcome to You Don't Play Boxing. We are here for Tyson Fury against Francis Ngannou. Not an influencer boxing fight, but definitely a crossover boxing fight as Ngannou makes his professional boxing debut. His first fight in almost 2 years. My name is Martin Dom and I'm joined by Donna Corby and by Harry Davis. 2 weeks on from One Fury's big night. Tomorrow night is the Elder Statesman's big night. Let's try and talk about this fight as if it's not as one-sided as it will probably be. Let's talk about Francis Ngannou first. Let's give him some credit, given that as I say, he last fought early 2022. So Ngannou was injured, had surgery, left the UFC. A lot of criticism for leaving the UFC, turning down big money, a potential fight against John Jones. Ultimately signed with the PFL and will now make, we believe, upwards of £10 million / dollars to take on Tyson Fury. Fair play, right?
Yeah, 100% fair play. He sort of came out, I think it was the open workouts with a message for his critics, had a little fumble with the bag, which is a good little jab there. But yeah, 100% fair play. It's, I think even Fury was making the point of, no one expects him to win anyway, so it's not going to damage his reputation with a loss. And if he does go out there and put on a better showing than what people are expecting, it can only sort of benefit him. He's not getting any younger. I think he's closer to 40 than he is 30. So it's again, there's no other better time he's going to do it. He's lost all the sort of better years, right? So it's a great opportunity for him. And I know, like we said, most people are not giving him a shot at all. But if the unthinkable does happen, then he's the lineal heavyweight champion of the world, which is, I don't think it will, but he's put himself in the place to get there, and he only deserves credit for that.
It's all right. Francis has talked about fighting boxing for a long time. He talked specifically about fighting Tyson Fury. There were some murmurings about him fighting Deontay Wilder. Were you convinced that it would happen at some point?
I certainly didn't think it was going to happen. Like, as recently as I think he did an appearance at the PFL in June when I was there and in Atlanta, and it was kind of wishy-washy and like Tyson signed the contract, all that stuff, and that was not that long before the fight got announced. It was pretty. I think the fight was announced like 3 or 4 weeks later, and it seemed as though he was not anywhere near it. And I kind of thought maybe do the Wilder thing. Maybe, Wilder had shown up at the PFL beforehand a week earlier and had kind of talked about how he wanted to do a 2-fight deal and go into the cage afterwards and all of that stuff. And I thought that maybe made a bit more sense than this Fury thing, which just didn't seem likely. But then I was also thinking that if Fury needed some sort of a tune-up fight, this was the biggest one he could make with the least amount of risk. So like he could probably fight. I mean, at this point, AJ is probably like a tune-up fight for Usyk, really, which is kind of crazy that it's come to that. But like that would be a risky fight, as would who else? Zhilei Zhang at the time, Joe Joyce. These people would have been considered much riskier than Francis Ngannou, and he can make probably more money for this. So I think it makes all the sense in the world, and I thought it made all the sense in the world back then, but certainly I didn't think it would happen. And now that it's here, fair play to Francis Ngannou for making it, because I think Dana White was right when he says like it's not quite Mayweather McGregor, but these guys have given a real good go of promoting this as a huge crossover event.
Oh, you certainly can't fault the promotion. I suspect that will be probably be more entertaining than the fight itself. And you're right about, I think that's the way to look at this fight for Tyson Fury, is that it's a warm-up fight. He himself hasn't fought since last December. It's hardly tested by Derek Chisora in London, and you can see in terms of how he looked earlier on in the year when they announced this fight and how he looks now, he had got himself out of shape a little bit. So it feels like this is a nice, unless he loses, but also unless he gets injured, just gets a feet cut or something. This is a perfect sort of 2/3 of the way through a Usyk fight camp. That fight, all being well, should be announced for December 23rd, back here in Saudi. And if Tyson goes on to do the business Saturday night, does the business in December, really, he's played a blinder and earned a lot of money in the process.
December 23rd just sounds so soon. First off, it's incredibly disrespectful to Francis to go, yeah, he's actually going to fight in 8 weeks as well, in a proper, undisputed fight. just in case you were planning on traveling out or you were planning on buying this pay-per-view and you really could only afford to buy one, don't worry, buy the one in December instead. This one is not as big. It kind of hoodwinks the promotion a little bit. And I do think that Francis is dangerous. Like, he's more dangerous. I think the comparison we're always making is he's more dangerous than Conor was to Floyd. And even if you look at, Floyd and these exhibitions and stuff, Floyd has like got cuts in these exhibitions. I think he got a cut against Deji. And it's like, he shouldn't be getting touched by Deji, but these things can happen. Like, a freak thing can happen. So, it's risky. And I think Tyson doesn't particularly like the idea of having one fight announced, and it's announced that they're fighting, and then they keep saying on all these broadcasts, like, so on December 23rd, that's not fully out there yet. We'll see how that works, but it just, to me, it seems like they're playing with fire a little bit. I know that Francis has very little chance in actuality, but it is the old cliches. Like, they're cliches for a reason. Like, it is heavyweight boxing and all of that. Like, you never know. It's a little risky to me.
All it takes is a straight head, isn't it? We've seen Tyson can put on an absolute clinic for as many rounds as he wants, but if Francis gets in there and there's a clash of heads, then that's it. But there's certainly, I was sceptical about December 23rd, as you should be, really, 2 months on. But there's absolutely no indication that won't be the case. Usyk expected to be ringside, and I suspect they'll certainly. I think what the Saudis want is the end of. I think it's after Club World Cup, or there's a football event on here as well, and they basically want that fight to round out that. So I think they're set on the 23rd, and I mean, even Usyk himself has said, I'm not really going to, well, he'll be ready, but I'm not really 100% in the Daniel Dubois fight. But I suspect he's in a position where if he doesn't take this fight now, then he is largely frozen out, given, well, who else is he going to fight, and certainly not for this much money. Harry, talk me through, if we try and assume for a second or two that Francis can, well, we know Francis can win, and we know how he wins. Probably that's by knocking Tyson Fury out. But everyone accepts the difficulty is getting into position, into range. You've watched Francis enough in the UFC. Have you seen anything that suggests that he can do that? Not just do that, but do it against someone like Tyson Fury?
Yeah, we definitely have seen that he can do that, but we need to forget it's been a long time since, right? I mean, like you said, his last fight, January 22, didn't really strike that fight because of his knee injuries, was sort of a Dagestani wrestling clinic from a Cameroonian the whole fight. And then the last time we actually did see his striking skills was March 2021 against Stipe Miocic when he won the title. So we're almost talking, almost 2 years since actually well over 2 years since that fight. So that's the last time we've seen it. And again, he had, major surgery on his knee. We've not really we haven't seen him since then. Is he going to be the same? He's got older. Everyone says he looks slower on the pad. So yes, we've seen him in the UFC, knock out guys in minutes. So I think his average fight time on the way to the title was, he's knocking guys out in under 60 seconds, under 2 minutes. However, these are all UFC fighters, many of them wrestlers, nowhere near the accolades of Fury in the ring. So, yes, we've seen him do it with 4-ounce gloves, but this was several years ago. He's, again, like I said, 2 knee surgeries later, he's slowing down. I know a lot of people have made a lot of, stuff of him on the pads looking slow, but you're comparing it to arguably the best boxer in the world at the minute. So when you put those side by side, I don't think there's anyone who's going to look nowhere near the level Tyson is. So yes, we've seen him do it, but that was a long time ago. And he's going into a different discipline. Things are very different. So I know that the whole thing's been made with Mike Tyson in his corner. That's going to hopefully give him a big boost. But I do see him landing a few, but I don't see them turning Fury's lights out.
Donna, any thoughts on just how successful Francis can be in terms of closing that distance?
Yeah, since it's been announced, I've been playing devil's advocate the whole time and saying, like, I think Francis has a lot more than the chance people are giving him insofar as, like, people talk about, he can't punch and all this, and it's like, I think anyone who thinks Francis can't put anyone's lights out should go and take a smack off him and then see if their opinion is different. Take a little right hand to the body from him, like a going 50%. This guy is one of the hardest punchers to ever live, and Tyson Fury, I mean, they do talk about his chin, and he's never been knocked out or anything, but he's been dropped a lot in the post Klitschko part of his career, like in the post weight gain, weight loss part. And he's 35 now. He's gaining and losing a lot of weight again. Like he's going up and down. Like he claims that he was up at 350. I don't know if that's true. And now he'll be down at 270. I don't know about that, but you're talking about multiple body shifts of, I mean, he lost over 100 pounds to get back in 2018 and then up and down 40, 50, 60 pounds regularly in his 30s. So that does have an effect. And you saw it against Wilder. He got put down a lot in the third fight. So, and what did we see in the Chisora fight that made him look like the best heavyweight in the world, right? Like I mean, not that Usyk looked great against Dubois or anything, but he's definitely not the superstar he was as recently as like 2 years ago in terms of ability and all of that. And that's not to say that Ngannou is going to win. I'm just putting a little seed in there of it's not completely out of the question that Francis pulls this off here. And at the same time as well, this Mike Tyson thing it's not an insignificant factor. I know that he's being paid quite handsomely to be involved in all of that, but at the same time, like this, if you think about it, Tyson Fury's entire life, from the second he was born, was about emulating this guy. And now that guy's sole purpose on Saturday night is for Tyson Fury to lose and be knocked out. That's got to be playing on his mind a little bit, right? I would have to imagine.
Tell you whose mind it is playing on. I can't believe I'm mentioning it. I was going to try and get through this podcast without mentioning much stuff. But John Fury, I mean, 2 weeks after I kind of, say what you like about Misfits, but it benefits, I think, from having someone like, even if they don't love it too much, they say they don't, it probably benefits from having someone like John Fury cause chaos. But last night at the press conference here, there was never any intention of having him at the top table. But he found his way up there and managed to find a seat from somewhere, and then just proceeded to have I'd say it wasn't a shouting match with Mike Tyson because a match involves two different people, both trying hard. Mike Tyson, I think, was just bemused. And as interesting as it would have been if he'd got up, he very much stayed seated while John Fury just took it to him. And I just wonder. I know we spoke about this before, and Tommy Fury said, "Oh, he doesn't mind" and everything else. But I just wonder. Surely Tyson must be thinking, "What is he doing here? What is he doing? Gets taking his top off again for some sort of pretend face-off. It's just getting a bit much now."
I think that Tyson doesn't, particularly for an event like this, which isn't super important. He's not super concerned about the result. I think he kind of seems to be. It appears. I mean, you're there, you would know more, but it appears on camera like he's finding it kind of funny. And this is a tough event to promote as well because there's really no bad blood between the two. There's really no jeopardy. They've already announced that Tyson Fury's going to win, essentially. Like they've already gone, oh, well, Tyson's going to fight in 8 weeks. He's not going to do that if he loses. So we kind of know the result. We kind of don't think there's bad blood between the two. It's not a super, like, I think that he's kind of thinking anything that pushes this thing a bit further is probably funny, but you don't see John very much when Tyson's, when he fights in America, or when he fought in America back in the day, you don't see any of John. And I think that's probably, I'm sure Tyson doesn't have a problem with that. It really seemed during the KSI week that Tommy thinks that the John Fury thing is good and like enjoys it and wants more of it, which I don't know what he's thinking, because Tommy's a pretty clever guy. I don't know where this idea that John's shtick is funny, like that doesn't really play into Tommy being like a smart guy with a bit of personality about him, but it is a very strange part of it. And I thought Mike Tyson played it pretty much perfect. KSI should have played it that way, of like John starts shouting, John pops the shirt off, and just sit there and say, well, I've got a fight we've got a fight to concern ourselves with on Saturday. I mean, if KSI did that with John, it would have been hilarious. If he was like, yeah, I guess you can do all your shouting, but I've got to fight Tommy Saturday. But yeah, I think the John Fury thing, they got to chill out with it a little bit. I'm sure the Saudis don't love it either.
Well, I was going to say, I just don't know what they think. When you imagine, like, what on earth is going through their head? I don't imagine they see many boxing press conferences as it is. Never mind involving John Fury. But anyway, we are recording this before the day, and I think we can take an educated guess. Francis has said he'll come in around 270, which would be a career heaviest just simply because he had to weigh in at or under 265 in the UFC. It's not a huge difference. Let's not get excited, but it will mean that he is, if not heavier than Fury, around about the same weight, which means Fury won't necessarily be able to manhandle him quite as much as maybe he has his other opponents.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I was looking at just the weights, just out of curiosity today. I think the heaviest Fury came in was 277 for the Wilder trilogy, and I think the Chisora trilogy was about 268. So we'll probably be similar weights. So I don't think there's too much to look into in terms of who's going to bully who and who's going to have the weight advantage. I know Francis was sort of saying when he was asked about his weight, he didn't want to come in really low, but just simply because of that, he didn't want to get sort of overbeared in the clinch by Fury and whatnot. So yeah, it's a couple pounds heavier than he was in the UFC, but I don't really think the weight will have, too much of a importance in the fight. I think it will mainly be, if it's in the clinch, maybe, but given the similar sort of sizes, and I know this is sort of the whole within the conversation around Fury's careers. Is he really 6'9"? Like, you look at the face-off with him and Ngannou, and there's a couple inches at most. So I know that's sort of been speculated a lot for Fury's career, but I don't really think there's that much difference in size, and weight, and even reach. I think it's pretty similar. So that sort of, Taylor tape, they're pretty similar. It's more just the skill difference, which is, vastly different.
Do you think Francis Ngannou would beat the current Derek Chisora?
That's a good question. I mean, Tyson Fury seems to think so, and I really do reckon that Francis Ngannou would have a good shot against any aging heavyweight, like any heavyweight who's been knocked out. Chisora not as much as like Dillian White. I think he could have beat Dillian White. White got put down by Alexander Povetkin within the kind of the COVID era, and then of course viciously knocked out by Tyson Fury as well. I think I don't reckon, like, I think Ngannou would be able to beat some serious contenders. So yeah, someone like a Chisora, someone like Dillian White, he probably could have beat, but it's risky. Like, it would have been really risky to give him a tune-up fight with a name like that, because he could have gone out there and lost. So or looked bad or whatever. I thought the perfect fight for him was Joseph Parker, because then you would have got he probably would have knocked out Joseph Parker just because he's so much bigger. So Joseph Parker coming to the end of his career, and it would have brought the Tyson Fury thing into it more. It would have given you a bit more of an emotional thing because they're such close friends, and you could have had the fight happen on the Fury and Chisora undercard, something like that. I don't know. I think that probably would have been the way to go if they were going to do it, but I think this air of mystery is also good too when you do these crossover fights of what can you expect. But I think personally he would, if he fought him now, beat Derek Chisora or Dillian White.
I think you make a good point about the mystery, and as you said before, we can look at Pad, but we can look at him in the UFC. We can only really imagine how much he has improved or changed in 12 weeks in training camp in terms of focusing purely on boxing, and that's the only tiny little unknown, isn't it? We all know, I think, how we think the fight will play out, essentially however Tyson wants it to play out. And there's that tiny little bit of mystery. You can say, yeah, but we don't actually know what Francis Ngannou looks like in a pure boxing match.
Yeah, I think that it's really a fascinating. Like, I think any of these crossover fights are fascinating because at some point, one of these MMA fighters is going to catch the guy and win. It can. I mean, it happens a lot in, like, if you see like it happens more so when there's a little bit of a slight change to the rules, like a BKFC or the triad combat. You saw a lot of the MMA guys winning that or something like that. So if they get a little bit of leeway, but in the straight up boxing, it tends to be a little bit tougher. So yeah, I think it's going to be a kind of I do think wait and see till Francis lands one. I think he will land at least one clean. Like, everyone said Conor wouldn't land a glove on Floyd. Conor landed some pretty clean ones, but Floyd had a famously, he'd never been properly down. I know he was knocked down the one time, but not really. And he'd never been particularly badly hurt in his career. Whereas Tyson, you could argue, should have been stopped in the first Wilder fight. A lot of referees would have stopped that fight. And he's been put down, I think, 5 times by Wilder, put down by Steve Cunningham. I guarantee you this: Francis Ngannou hits a lot harder than Steve Cunningham. I'm certain of it.
Okay, I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, anyone's going to predict that Francis Ngannou is going to win, but Can you see anything other than the way I think it would go is that Tyson just does what he wants to do for? I mean, it's a 10-round fight, so I don't imagine he'll want to go too far, but I don't know, 5, 6 rounds and then 7, 8 goes as a show.
I think so, yeah. I mean, I sort of had this conversation with one of Fury's sparring partners. I said, "Is there a worry that this thing doesn't even go a couple rounds?" And he was sort of, that could be the case just because the skill difference is so big. But he was sort of predicting, maybe it would be done before 5 and 6. But it's hard to really know. I mean, I know Floyd said with the whole Conor thing that he was carrying him for a few rounds. He says because he didn't want it to be stopped so early, and if he could have, he would have stopped it early. But with this, I'm unsure. There's just so many question marks. Like Donna said in the Fury Chisora trilogy, like Tyson didn't look the greatest. It's Ngannou's boxing debut. We haven't seen him in a proper sort of striking match for almost 3 years. There's so many. It's hard to really say how long this is going to go and who's going to look like what in the other ends just because of the inactivity factor. So I think it will go past the halfway mark. Is that because they both actually probably want it to give the fans their money's worth? Maybe. Is it because they want to sort of find their feet in the early couple rounds? I don't know, but I think it will be stopped towards the seventh, 8th round. But yeah, I don't know. It's just so many question marks. It's hard to actually give an official sort of prediction on it.
I reckon. I look. It would just be so great for something wild to happen and for Francis to win. Just it would after all the messing in the heavyweight division over the last few years, it would be great for someone to come in and be like, all right, now you've got to completely throw out the script and start over again from scratch. And it would be brilliant for PFL as well. If he comes back and he's the lineal heavyweight champion of the world, it would make their business move look like a stroke of genius. I think he was saying that, I mean, Tyson was talking about during the week that there's no rematch clause, which is, I think that's Tyson talking. In the same interview, he said Tommy made $10 million to fight KSI. So I think you take what Tyson says with a grain of salt. He also says he only made $600,000 to fight Klitschko, which I don't know if that, the reports are of a whole lot more than that. So I think you take that with a grain of salt. But I do reckon that, if Francis can get something done, it would be amazing. And I think, so for that reason, I'm going to put it out there into the world that Francis Ngannou will stun everyone in the early rounds, land something big, and maybe if he doesn't win, he'll at least concern us.
Well, I was wrong when I said no one was going to predict Francis Ngannou win. Probably shouldn't do it while members of Fury's team are standing around about me either. Anyway, we live in hope that something out of the ordinary will happen in Saudi Arabia on Saturday night. We'll be back on Sunday to recap all the action. Stick with Mirror Fighting. Until then, for everything that goes on, thank you for listening, thank you for watching. Until then, take care.